Thank you for tuning in to the BVLOS Blueprint. I'm Adam Zirkelback, and with me is our Director of Regulatory Affairs, Rob Knockenhauer. Today, we have the pleasure of being joined by Richard, the Director of Drive Ohio UAS Center, and their lead pilot, Daniel. Recently, Drive Ohio was granted a flight over people and moving vehicles waiver. So we're going to learn as much as we can about these operations. And Richard, why don't you get us started by giving us a high-level overview of kind of about the waiver and what we'll be referencing today.
Sure. Thanks, Adam. So the waiver was anchored on the Smart 33 corridor, which has been the test bed for Drive Ohio UAS Center research projects. We had a 5-year project that went into UTM, USS infrastructure and radar deployment. And it took a while for us to get the information required for the waiver. We started in 2021 on a research project, and now we are expanding out to this BVLOS waiver using the census to build up our use case on the corridor.
Awesome, awesome. And Rob, can you kind of dive into why a waiver like this is such a big deal in our current regulatory state?
Well, I mean, I think what makes it a big deal is that, operations over people has been a challenge for the longest time. I mean, ever since the rules have come out, there's been a restriction on operations over people. Back in the 2019 timeframe, the ASTM standard came out for parachute recovery systems that started to enable a lot more waivers to operations over people to be released in that timeframe up until about 2021, April of 2021 to be precise, when the operations over people rule was released. That basically the FAA was pushing the industry to develop aircraft that would be compliant with the low impact thresholds that were defined under the operations over people rule. What quickly kind of happened after that point was that, within a year or so, they started to recognize that there weren't a number of manufacturers clamoring to get onto the operations over people declaration of compliance, primarily because it's very hard. I mean, the impact thresholds are really low. And in fact, at this point, 3 years later, there's one aircraft that is compliant with the operations over people rule, and that is the EBX. Shout out to Google there, I guess. And so the challenge has been, there's been kind of a loosening where the FAA is now granting waivers again for parachute recovery systems. And so your pathways for getting to do operations over people is either through a parachute, being on the declared compliant with the rule, or having a type certificate. Our aircraft has neither of those things. And so what Ohio DOT has done here is kind of led the way of getting an approval for an operations over people in moving vehicles in admittedly a low risk context, which is what a number of us have been seeking in the industry for a long time. So that's kind of the pioneering, really exciting piece about this particular waiver, is that with an aircraft such as ours and other aircraft that are of similar size that have a long history of operation, that can be pointed to as giving a level of reliability that is not documented through a DNR process for getting a type certificate. It's a big step forward for the industry. So I'm pretty excited about this.
Yeah, I'm excited for this waiver too, and we'll kind of get more in towards the end, about the performance and how that will help the waiver and kind of where we want to expand on it. But throwing it back to you, Richard, here for a second. When you first started setting out for this waiver, what was kind of the goal? Obviously, we know it was a kind of a long process to finally achieve this. But what was the main reason? What were you guys trying to achieve?
So the research project was based on supporting our ground infrastructure, traffic management, incident response. And by putting a vehicle in the air, we get a different view. We can respond quicker time. So that was the driving goal behind it. So when you go from VLOS to BVLOS, that's the game changer, right? We can fly longer distance, respond to different situations, and get there in a more timely fashion. So that was the big driver, is how can we get there beyond visual line of sight.
Awesome. And I guess we'll give Daniel here some spotlight. He's one of the lead pilots with Drive Ohio. And Daniel, just kind of to get us started, have you ever operated a BVLOS mission before this?
Before this, yeah, we'd done a couple emergency COA type. We were working out in southeast Ohio looking for contamination in a creek, and there was just no way to do it without going beyond line of sight. So we were able to. I think Rich was actually a big part of that, getting an emergency BVLOS approval sent through that way. Other than that, this is going to be the first true BVLOS since then, I suppose.
Awesome. And BVLOS is still a growing thing, and there are a large percent of pilots under Part 107 who have not flown BVLOS, at least legally anyway. What's a challenge? What was one of the challenges you faced? Whether it was flight planning or coming up with how to lower the risk for these BVLOS missions for Drive Ohio.
I think the ground risk, I'm sorry, was it for Daniel or for me?
Go for it.
So reducing the ground risk is what got us the waiver. That was the biggest impetus. The defined area, and ODOT has a strong pedigree. We have a fleet of 60 aircraft and 40 pilots. We have standard operating procedures. We have training programs. We have a safety management system. We broke down all the challenges of nominal, off nominal situations, concept operations just for that specific area. So those were the ingredients that helped us to get to that point.
Awesome. Yeah, and those are all pieces of the waiver that are during the application process that really build that safety case and build that reliability that inherently gets approvals later on down the line. So even with those, Daniel, when you go to flight planning, what are some challenges or things that you have to make sure you look out for?
So one of the first things that it became quickly apparent when we were in the 2019 situation is radio link, right?
Mm-hmm.
So having the census having the LT radio link, I feel like really changed the game when it comes to like, hey, you guys can go ahead and we were able to prove that we have a solid C2 link, even though the aircraft's out of sight. That was the major challenge, because there was more than one time where we were dealing with potential lost link or really fuzzy link when we were flying down in the hills of the southeast there.
Mm-hmm.
But after that, just a matter of making sure we have proper flight locations identified. If the aircraft does have an issue while it's beyond line of sight, do we have a good place for it to ditch if we have to? We obviously don't want it to. We want it to come back to us. But if we have to cut it free, what area can we put it to or point it to? And can we cut it free with reasonable safety?
Yeah. And safety always in mind. You always have to have those things planned out. Like you said, you never want them to happen, and we never want them to happen either. But having that plan in place is always the best thing to do, especially when you go to take off and fly. Now, Daniel, can you dive in a little bit more about the waiver? Like how long of this stretch of corridor is there, and get a little bit of the details around that.
So the first part of the waiver, or the first waiver, is set for a 4-mile corridor.
Yep.
I think was it a half mile to a mile away from? So it's following US 33 between Dublin, Ohio, and Marysville, Ohio, and it's focused on the north side of US 33, and I think it stretches for 1 mile. Rich, correct me if I'm wrong, away from 33.
Mm-hmm. It's offset.
Okay.
And when you're flying this section of corridor, what are you looking for? And I mean, I know Richard talked to a little bit, but tell us a little more about the data you're collecting.
So part of this is just proving the concept of beyond line of sight through the corridor. It's a smart corridor that's been set up with the idea of beyond line of sight flight in mind, and it's exercising the equipment that's on board. It's exercising the aircraft, proving that we can potentially expand this use case beyond. When it comes to actual missions we're going to be using it for traffic management systems. We're going to be using it for roadway condition inspection if we can, up to potentially a search and rescue or emergency management situation.
Yeah.
But there's one of these things where we don't know exactly what we're going to use it for. That's the way the drone industry has always been, right? You have an idea, but then you learn as you go.
Yeah, and I think it's very
It's
interesting.
valid.
You know, we started dabbling in the AI side of things, and once you start doing that, you realize how much data you do have. You know, when you do fly, even just a roadway, anything from the vegetation management to road conditions. If there's an accident, you could be first on scene. You know, like you said, those use cases just keep popping up everywhere. So I know there's tons that you can use it for. And kind of what you said, Daniel, I'll kind of lean over here to Rob now. How important is it for waivers like this? Is it to have like prior history or performance past that shows reliability and proper use? How important is that for waivers like this?
So certainly for waivers like this, where you're looking to get permission in the case to address the ground risk that's being identified in this use case here to do the operations over people and moving vehicles, it is a factor. You know, there's I mean, I'd had a conversation actually with the FAA regarding this, and it was asked, you know, in the years that we've been operating, like how many you know, how many incidents have we had? And so it's, you know, and that was a bit informal, but I think what it is at this stage, and it's probably it's a credit, I think, to the fact that the FAA at this point, you know, as you're well aware, Adam, and perhaps you, Rich, and Daniel, know that we've helped a number of folks get waivers over the past 3 years, and you know, so the FAA is quite aware of the fact that there are a number of folks that are operating the Centero, doing BVLOS operations, and what we do, and this has been somewhat inconsistent, is that we provide reports to the FAA on the operations that we've done. I've asked our clients to do the same. I don't know if they do or not, but it's and so, you know, we're putting data into their system that is giving them a higher level of assurance that the system that we're operating is, you know, fundamentally sound. You know, it's I mean, you know, it's not perfect. You know, it's like nothing is. You know, it's just like there's always going to be some you know, chance that something is going to go wrong during a mission, and that there's ways that you know, they're going to be beyond your control. However, you know, one of the things that we've done a pretty good job with is addressing, you know, the common, you know, failure modes of the aircraft and identifying what the pilot will do when those common issues arise, you know. And so I mean, Daniel, you mentioned it earlier, talking about like, where is your ditch point, you know. It's like, and having an understanding of like where you're gonna plan your operation to have those safety elements in it. And certainly when we write waivers, you know, we talk about giving the pilot the option for a controlled flight into terrain, you know, just to, as it's something that nobody wants to do, but it is always on the table if in order to maintain safety of the NAS and the ground risk below. So so yeah, I think that's you know, having the history, I think, has been helpful in that regard.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting too. I never thought about it till you said it, Rob. But you know, as we progress and we fly these missions, providing that data to the FAA, you know, as operators, we're actually helping ourselves by providing that information. You know,
Absolutely.
by doing that, the FAA is able to see and realize and study, so these things can become more common, and we can expand the operation and capability. Which I think kind of leads into my next question here for Richard. Are there plans to expand this waiver?
It is. There are. So after we put some hours on this one, the infrastructure I mentioned earlier, the radar systems that we have up there, we want to introduce that into the waiver for the detect and avoid piece.
Okay.
So that would give us an opportunity to show incremental growth there, demonstrate our capabilities, you know, and to the point that Rob mentioned about data, we've been sharing data with the FAA and on multiple levels. One, to the point of we supply our fleet number of flights that we've had, incidents out of our SMS safety management system plan to the FAA. And at first it was anonymous, but after we got the feedback from the FAA, they realized it was a Department of Transportation, and they felt it was credible enough that it allowed them to change the regulatory nature of some of their requirements. So same thing here. We want to supply that BVLOS data to them, so it'll help other companies and entities get these waivers. But yeah, once we finish putting some hours on this waiver. That's our goal, is to demonstrate how we can incorporate sensors, radar specifically, to expand the BVLOS envelope.
Awesome, awesome. And Rob, back to you here. How do we see rolling this out for more customers, more operators? How do we see that kind of function working out?
Well, so it's a challenge, right? So what's happened. So Ohio DOT is a trusted operator, and has a long relationship with the FAA, and has worked pretty closely on a lot of things. The Sky Vision, the whole development there was kind of done hand in hand with the FAA. So there's a long history there. So we're working with operators as well that also have, a history with the FAA and can leverage that. And I think, what we're in a place of doing is, and we identify this when we actually sell an aircraft, part of what's included in that is a training component. And so, we're making sure that any operator that we put a Centero, in front of, has the proper tools at their disposal to understand how to manage these more complex BVLOS flight operations, and have a higher level of awareness of kind of the elevated risk that they're taking on as a result of running these types of operations. And so what we've been able to showcase to the FAA is that the operators that have chosen to go this path have this understanding, because we're outside of a standard 107 operation. So this is not a standard commercial operation. And I think what a lot of people may not necessarily realize is that when you go from doing a standard 107 to doing, whether it's operations over people or flying BVLOS or some combination, or higher altitude, it is not, there's it's not just an incremental change in risk. It's an order of magnitude difference in risk. And so you have to be really fully aware of how you manage that, and certainly the interactions that you have to have with the FAA to prove that you're a trusted operator, or that you have the capability to be a trusted operator, is what you need to demonstrate, and certainly what we help our folks to do with the waiver applications, and identifying that the robust training and the understanding about how we're going to do risk management for these operations.
Yeah,
Part of what we do. Oh,
go ahead.
Sorry, Adam. Part of what we do at ODOT is we basically type certify our pilots. We put them in one aircraft, that's it. And then the more complex operations, we have a core of 3 regional pilots that fly it. And Daniel is a certified FAA A&P mechanic. He has a background in RC flying, so he's our fixed wing operator. We just don't give anybody the opportunity to fly that, so it helps us. In regards to Rob's statement about a trusted operator, we're a champion operator for multiple companies flying and proving out the BVLOS waiver technologies and the risk ground risk reduction piece too.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think that's very interesting, that you guys, you leverage one pilot kind of for one aircraft. And I think we'll see benefits of that, and we'll see a lot more companies kind of embrace that, because there really is a difference between, flying a quad for a utility pole inspection versus, flying beyond visual line of sight. It's just 2 different mindsets. And Daniel, kind of to keep going on this feeling here, what is it like to operate, essentially like a one of its kind waiver? What does that kind of feel like?
Well, it's always an adventure, right? So yeah. It is very, very cool. The gravity of it's not lost on us, and being able to get out, fly the aircraft. I don't know. It's been exciting to really get. We're almost done with our training proof of concept for ourselves. And then from there, once we're getting out, we're doing extending our range, stretching our legs a little bit. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah. And before we started the recording here, we kind of talked. Daniel has almost up to 600 flight hours on the sticks under his Part 107. If you had to give advice to anyone out there to really up their stick time, or gain some valuable experience to eventually fly a fixed wing, or more complex operations like a beyond visual line of sight, or maybe even one day we'll see one-to-many fixed wing, what would you give as a freebie on advice to gain that kind of experience?
One of the things we tell all of our pilots when they're first starting out is if you can fly one of the little cheap aircraft that you buy at Walmart, you're well on your way. Those things are, that they're really good training tools. They make you fly. Learn how to fly, on the sticks. Don't rely on automation.
Yep. And we see that a lot, especially with the, some of the quads like DJI or the ones that have the GPS hold. Those things are, even for someone like me with low stick time, much easier. But I'm sure even the cheaper ones, the GPS drift and all that, they really test your skills.
Yeah, you just know your machine inside and out. Like, for me, when it comes to taking like the Centero off of automated mode, I don't even think about it. I just flick the switch and start flying it. But that comes from having flown aerobatic RC aircraft for, 5-10 years prior. Before any quadcopters even showed up.
Oh yeah.
That's awesome.
All right. Well, awesome. That's all the questions I had. Does anyone else have anything to say? Or Rob, do you have any questions you want to add?
No, I mean, I will, I'll echo what Daniel just said about, getting that stick time. So, I don't have a lot of background in RC flying. I basically kind of learned on the fly when I worked for a previous drone manufacturer. We were building our own aircraft. But what I did see is like we had a lot of attrition in the early years of our operations and our builds, and I learned how to quickly identify when things were not functioning properly. And I certainly pile drive my share of small quads into the ground in the early years. But it's a skill that you really have to experience in order to acquire. And it's an interesting thing. You mentioned M2N. I was just at a workshop in DC this week talking about M2N, strategizing about how you actually manage exceptions and how you manage the safety case of doing that type of an operation. And it's different, so the stick skills are becoming not as essential because now we are, relying on the autonomy in ways that we really haven't been. And, particularly when it comes to BVLOS, it's like, you're not going to take the sticks when the aircraft's 3 miles away because you don't have the dynamic feedback that you need that you would have if you could see it. So, it's we're in a sea change right now, and so it'll be interesting to see where it carries us in the future. So
yeah, I think as we move towards Part 108, get into BVLOS, I think that's a giant step in the right direction, because a lot of the culture in Part 107 is non-aviation related. A lot of operators are not pilots. And when you start flying Part 108 and BVLOS, you have to have a good knowledge of airspace and true aviation skills that is non-existent in the Part 107 communities. So we're prepping to go down that path and get some formal training with our local college, Sinclair Community College, and they're going to help us solve that solution.
Yeah, well, thank you guys for joining. I'm just going to summarize real quick. Ohio Drive and Ohio DOT are doing big things, obviously, with this almost a one-of-a-kind waiver right now of a stretch of corridor, flight over people, moving vehicles. And we can't stress enough that having pilot experience, time on the sticks, and performance history on the drone and aircraft where you're flying is so important to getting these expansive waivers and these more complex operation approvals. So if you're looking to get a waiver like this or an area that's more specific or more tailored to your needs, really start to get out there. As the operators, we're the one that's moving the needle for our own success. So thank you again, Richard, for joining, and Daniel for joining, and Rob, as always, it's a pleasure. And we'll see you next time on BVLOS Blueprint.